What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video here on Brotherhood Outdoors. And today's video we're going to be talking about what happens when you hinge cut a tree. And this is going to vary depending on the species of tree, and of course there's some other variables on what time of year you cut the tree and how far did you cut it through and all this other stuff. But I'm going to show you a few examples of trees that I've hinge cut around here, and I want to tell you kind of like what happens and what's some of the main purposes of it. Now, I'm not a wildlife biologist. I didn't go to school for this kind of stuff. I'm not anything, certified special in that regard. But this is something that I've done for the last 5 years. I've been hinge cutting trees around my dad's property and now my own property here, and I have another property in another part of Indiana. We experiment with it. We do some hinge cutting with different species of trees, and some do better than others. It's got a lot of benefits. One of the biggest benefits is food for the deer, cover for the deer, and in this application, creating sunlight for a food plot back here in the timber. That's clover, and it needs a decent amount of sunlight. It doesn't need tons, but it needs a fair amount to be able to grow and have the sunlight that it needs to be able to sustain. And so I'm going to show you what actually happens to a hinge cut tree if this is for my situation. I'm up in northern Indiana, and I pretty much always, except for a few exceptions, for example, I come here to check on this clover plot, and there's a few trees that are just taking up too much shade, and they're gonna eventually kill out that portion of the plot if I let them grow much longer. So I hinge cut them back. Ordinarily, I don't do that when everything's greened up. Most of the time when I hinge cut, I'm doing it when it's between the months of, let's say, January and March. You can get into April a little bit up north here, but not much more than that, and then stuff's starting to green up already. It's not the biggest problem in the world if you cut in the warmer months. It's just nicer when you cut the trees when they're dormant, and it just seems to work out better. The survival rate seems to be a little bit higher, at least for most of the stuff that we have to cut around here. But yeah, so I'm going to show you some of the trees that we've cut and kind of what happens to them, how they grow, how they rebound, basically, instantly, seemingly. Like, I cut most of these trees you're going to see all here. Most all these trees I cut within the last 4 months. They're already doing awesome, and they were all dormant when I cut them back a few months ago. And so here's one of those exceptions of a tree that I cut in a warm season setting, and this is a species of maple that I cut just because the crown was huge and it was taking up this one spot of sunlight to be able to open it up right through here, down on this section of the plot in the middle of the day. And I was like, man, this spot is just it's gonna be pretty bare if it doesn't get much sunlight. But once the sun gets up here midday, everything from here, that direction is all to the west, so it'll get plenty of sunlight that comes in all through up here. Let me show you a little bit more here. You can kind of see there's this path of food, and the sunlight kind of follows the path where it's opened up. Same with this way, there's kind of sunlight that follows the path. At some point in the day, this plot will all get sunlight, so it's fine now. But in some situations, you got to cut back trees even in the warm season to try to, save some of your other food sources. And, that tree should still be fine. I just don't prefer to do it in the warm months. So I was out here with my buddy the other day, and we were walking around here. I was showing him this food plot, and he said, hey, your trees that you just cut a couple months ago, they already have a full crown, just like everything else, and they have shoots growing off the side of the trunk already. I said, oh, that's kind of cool. I said, yeah. I said, I've come back a year later and looked at them and gone, oh, that's cool. I said, but I've never come back 2 months later, and then my trees already have new growth on them. And so he's like, yeah, that's cool. I said, what, I should do a video on what happens to a tree after you hinge cut it within the first couple months, going from a dormant phase to a warm season phase. And that's what I'm gonna do now. So all these trees along here, all these small trees all throughout here, I cut all of these back in February, March, most of them I think in March. Everything was dormant. There was nothing. There was actually standing like 6 inches of snow on the ground. It was cold, and so that's when I cut all these. But they already, if you look, it looks like a huge hedgerow. They already all have crowns on them. They're doing totally fine, and most of them have plenty of cambium layer, but even some that didn't are still doing just fine. Like this one still has cambium layer, but not much. I mean, that one was, pretty much cut too far through for what I normally would like. And it's still growing. I mean, everything's still growing totally fine. It's even got new growth coming up the side of the trunk there. I mean, it's still living. It just might not live as long, but it's still living. And then what that's gonna create is new growth on the floor. Okay, you can see all these new little green shoots popping up here. But here's one of the cool things. Now these are some smaller trees but I cut these all back in March as well. And you know, you can see how the ends here from the section that I cut are they kind of seem dead. But the cambium layer, I bet if I cut into this right now, I bet water would be coming out of here. And it's probably totally doing just fine. Now, when I cut these, they didn't have any growth down the trunks at all. And now if you look, this is all growth, brand new growth, coming up the trunks of all these trees, all these little tiny shoots. None of that was there. That was all shaded out before, and you know, the crown was straight up and down in the sunlight here, and there was nothing growing on the sides of these little tiny trees. Now there is all kinds of stuff. And now, why is that a cool thing? Well, it means that not only is the crown alive, the tree's alive, it's getting plenty of nutrition, plenty of sunlight here now because it's growing new stuff on the trunk, which generally means it's getting plenty of nutrition from the ground and plenty of sunlight, because you need those two things for that kind of growth to even happen. But the cool thing is too, now for all these species of trees that we hinge cut that the deer do prefer, now there's even more growth. Not only is the crown growing and it's at ground level, you know, 36 inches off the ground at most where the deer can reach it, now there's new growth on the bases, which is going to produce even more food for the trees that the deer do prefer to eat the leaves off of and the buds and stuff. Now there's even more for them to eat. And at the same time, it's creating more sunlight for the food plot to produce even more food. And so that's just something to think about. There's actually a turkey feather right here. So that's just something to think about. And you know, I kind of thought, you know, maybe this is a good idea. Like, I've kind of talked about it, and I've kind of gone into detail with, you know, hinge cutting, and then saying, oh yeah, here's a tree I cut 3-4 years ago, look at the growth on it, or 2 years ago. But I haven't done one that's like, okay, what happens when you cut a tree? What happens like 3 months later when you go from like March to May, which is what it is right now. And that's how fast that took new growth on that, all those little trees right there. And most of these hinge cut trees are all doing the exact same thing. So that's something really cool I thought I would share with you guys. Hadn't really made a video quite like that one, you know, with showing you the results of a hinge cut tree that fast from the time it was cut to the warm season. I never went back and showed what happened that fast. That's what happens. I mean, they just at least when you cut them in the conditions I did, which was dormant phase going into spring, and then they're shooting up with nutrition and, you know, doing great. That's how fast it's producing new growth. That tree's all bloomed out, producing new growth, producing more sunlight for that tree to produce even more shoots on it, and producing more sunlight for the food plot. It's just a win-win. And so there's some of the big benefits to hinge cutting your trees, and the other thing is too, that's what happens after you hinge cut the tree. I want to thank you guys all for watching this video. Hopefully you guys got some entertainment and education out of it. If you did, please leave a thumbs up. That helps YouTube share this video to more people like you that enjoy these videos. If you haven't done so yet, also subscribe to the channel. That helps. I know that a lot of the people watching right now are not yet subscribed, so please do that. And if you could also, please drop me a comment. Let me know how I did with this video, and if you'd like to see more like it, or what else you would like to see that I may not have done before, or maybe you'd like to see it again. Also stay tuned. We are doing a deer hunt giveaway for this upcoming deer season that we are hoping to launch by June 1st. Hopefully we can make that happen, and one of you guys get to come out here and hunt with us. You get a crossbow, you get the whole experience, we pay for it, and you get to hunt with us on our own property, which is loaded with deer, by the way. There's a lot of deer on it. It's just going to be an awesome time. So thank you guys so much. I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.